Welcome to Battleground, where we cut through the noise, skip the speculation, and do a deep dive into what matters most to voters in all 7 of our swing states. Because no matter where you live, understanding the voters and issues that will decide this race, well, that's why we're here. And with just 80 days until the 2024 election, polls show this race remains incredibly tight. Democrats look to build on their recent momentum heading into their convention next week. And as a response, Donald Trump plans to head to the Arizona border, highlighting one of his strongest issues, why the split screen with the Democratic convention may be smart counter-programming for the GOP. Then, despite improving news on the rate of inflation, many of our swing state voters say the price of the things they pay for is still too high. How swing state economics remain one of the biggest issues in this race. I'm S.E. Cupp. We're 80 days away, and this is Battleground.
So when I win, I will immediately bring prices down. Starting on day one, we will end Kamala's war on American energy, and we will drill, baby, drill. We're going to drill, baby, drill.
Donald Trump holding a press conference yesterday at his New Jersey golf club. Despite polls showing recent momentum for Kamala Harris, Trump and his supporters remain confident in the former president's swing state firewall and know that no matter the polls, Donald Trump has proven time and again he can't be counted out. For more on where this race stands with just 80 days until Election Day, I'm pleased to be joined by veteran journalist and good friend Cillzza. Chris, great to see you.
Hello, S.E. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Chris, let's start with former President Trump. There is certainly evidence that Kamala Harris's rapid rise in the polls has changed the dynamic of this race. But for Democrats who shouldn't get overconfident about Donald Trump and should not count him out, that would be a mistake, right? He's been sort of Teflon.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to look at past and see if past is prologue. And I think generally speaking, it is, right? So if you go back and look at the 2016 national polling, for example, what you'll find is that Hillary Clinton at the end of that race in polling averages was ahead by 4.5 or 5 points, right? Now, she wound up winning the popular vote by, I think, 1.5 or 2, but Donald Trump overperformed. Okay, so that's one. Okay, let's go back and look at 2020. Joe Biden was ahead in the national popular vote at the end of the race by 8.5 points, 9 points. Now, he won the popular vote and he actually won the election, but he only won it by 2.5 or 3 percentage points. So I do think there is something to be said. At that press conference yesterday, Donald Trump said a lot of things, but one thing he said that I think is true is, I tend to poll a little low. He said, I don't know why that is. Maybe people don't want to tell people that they're for me. I think that may actually be it. Yeah. But there is some evidence from his past 2 presidential runs that he does perform better on when people get in the ballot box and vote than they tell pollsters.
And that's not even counting all the other things he's survived. Literally surviving an assassination attempt, surviving convictions, indictments.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, SC, it's so funny. I was thinking back in this recently. I remember it was, like July 2015, and Trump was in Arizona, and it was the very start of his campaign. And he said the very famous / infamous line, I prefer my war heroes not captured, talking about John McCain. And I remember, I was at the Washington Post at the time, and I remember writing something that said, well, Donald Trump had a good run.
That's the race, folks, right?
Right. Because insulting veterans in the Republican Party, you'd think like, nah, there's just no way. Like if Jeb Bush had done that, if any of the other candidates had done that, they would have had to apologize and there would be calls for him to leave the race. And for him, it was like a Tuesday. You're right. He is measured by the public by a different standard. He is measured as a celebrity and as a reality star, not as a politician. He gets away with and can survive things that no other politician could.
You're right. And all of that said, however, many Republicans now are both privately and publicly telling Trump to stay on message about the issues that favor him, the economy, border immigration policy, all of that. But he's really having a hard time doing that and avoiding, the personal insults.
Yeah, I mean, that's like when people tell me like, hey, Chris, just don't worry about stuff. Everything's going to work out. It's like, man, I get that that's what I should do, but that is not what I am capable of doing, right?
Yeah.
And I think you got to think like, look, Donald Trump is a 78-year-old man, right? He has been this guy his entire adult life, which is he kind of just says stuff. he, to be kind, exaggerates a lot of the time.
Yeah.
He is on the attack all the time. Like, he struggles to be on message.
Yeah, and I mean, there's an interesting aspect to this race, too, because demographically, there are different voters now. We've got a whole millions of new Gen Z voters coming in to vote, maybe for the first time. They might react differently to the Trump show. We'll have to wait and see. But here in Pennsylvania, where I am, the largest electoral prize in this race, 19 electoral votes, polls are very close. But Trump won here in 2016. Can he recreate that, do you think?
So I would say Pennsylvania, like when I'm ranking the 6 or 7, I guess, swing states, I would put Pennsylvania #1 and then Georgia #2.
In terms of importance or in terms of winnability? Importance.
In terms of what they both need to get to 270. There are paths without Pennsylvania. But look, I would say, if you tell me, if we could get in the time machine and go to November 6th and you tell me who wins Pennsylvania, I'll probably tell you that person won the election.
Yep, good point. Okay, the pick of Tim Walz by Kamala Harris, clearly designed to appeal to voters in Michigan and Wisconsin, but so was J.D. Vance. Who do you think is having the better go of it?
So let me first say broadly, Essie, that I think, and I'm very much part of, I lump myself in for the blame here. We put too much emphasis on how much the VP picks matter, right? It just, the last one I can definitely be convinced it mattered was Lyndon Johnson for JFK in 1960, which was 64 years ago, right? So like, I put that grain of salt in. That said, there's no question that the run of media attention that Walz has had, and that has corresponded with the overall positive attention for Harris's campaign, right? I mean, I don't think it's just Tim Walz. Kamala Harris has gotten a lot of good press attention. Is clearly better than J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance was kind of like a professional provocateur and kind of podcast guest before he ran for the Senate. So there's a lot of stuff out there, which is why I always thought they were going to pick someone other than him, just because there's just such a wealth of stuff he said in the past.
They don't seem to be deterred, but we'll check in. We'll check in another week. Cillzza, who I and many others read regularly on Substack. So great to see you as always.
Thank you, Essie. Always good to see you.
Okay, up next, Donald Trump is heading to the Arizona border next week during the Democrats' convention in Chicago. Will this work to wrestle the spotlight off the Dems? Battleground, we'll be right back.
No, they were a team. He appointed her as border czar, and she did the worst job in the history of borders, I will tell you.
Welcome back to Battleground. Next week, Democrats gather in Chicago for their national convention, but Donald Trump may be offering a compelling split screen as he heads to the Arizona border to tout one of his most critical issues, immigration and border security. And for voters in Arizona, these are key issues. According to recent polling there, 58% of Arizona residents say the U.S. does not have control of the southern border, a dynamic that continues to favor Donald Trump. For more on Donald Trump's plans in Arizona next week, I'm pleased to be joined by Stephanie Murray from the Arizona Republic. Stephanie, good to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So first, you've been doing some really good reporting about his plans next week. Do we know where Trump is going, what part of the border he may visit? Is he having a rally? What's the latest?
So right now, former President Donald Trump is considering coming to Cochise County in Arizona. It's a border county where, 84 miles of the county touch the U.S.-Mexico border. Thinking about coming next week. And, it is to make the case about immigration against Vice President Kamala Harris. She's going to be getting a lot of attention at the DNC next week. And so Trump is thinking about coming here. The mayor of Sierra Vista, one of the towns on that border, says that he will be there along with the police chief of that city. So Trump is looking at coming to Arizona for the first time since June. Any word on whether this is going to be an outdoor event or an indoor event, an issue that's become more important since that assassination attempt in Pennsylvania? There's no word on that yet. When J.D. Vance came to Arizona a couple of weeks ago to tour the border, he did an outdoor event, kind of walking along an unfinished portion of the border wall to make his case. So Trump could do something like that, but it's not quite clear. The plans are very much in flux, and typically, they tend to decide those plans really close to the date that he comes. I mean, yeah, this is new. This is all just coming together now. But it seems like a smart strategy for the Trump campaign. The issue of border security and immigration are so central to the GOP efforts in Arizona. How have Democrats tried to frame these issues in their favor? Democrats know that this is a really difficult issue for them, and what they've been trying to do in the first few weeks of Kamala Harris's presidential campaign is really pin immigration on Trump, saying that he tried to kill, or he successfully killed, a bipartisan border deal that was making its way through Congress earlier this year. Right now, polls still show that voters have more confidence in Trump and Republicans to handle the border, but that's the argument that she's making. On the other hand, Trump and Republicans are pinning the title border czar on Kamala Harris, pointing to her role addressing some of the root causes of immigration in the Biden administration, trying to hit her on that. So this is very much, a top issue. Republicans have spent 5 times as much on TV ads last month on immigration than Democrats did.
And in a piece you wrote this week, you quoted a Republican strategist in the state as saying that Arizona is an emerging problem for Donald Trump. He's up there. Explain that to us.
This is a remarkable turnaround from where we were at the end of June before Trump and Biden had that fateful debate. Polls in June and July showed Donald Trump ahead of Joe Biden by as much as 5 or 10 points, depending on when you add in third-party candidates. Now that Harris has been at the top of the ticket for a couple of weeks, they are tied. They are within the margin of error, with Harris even a couple of points ahead of Trump. So this has been, a remarkable change in the race, and you can see it on the ground. Harris was here in Arizona last week, where she drew 15,000 people to a rally, showing that, she has more excitement behind her. She's a more formidable opponent to Trump than Biden was. And so, Republicans and Trump had been feeling pretty comfortable in Arizona, ready to kind of set their sights on some other states they thought would be harder to win. But now their attention is swinging back here. You see it when Trump sends J.D. Vance, when he's planning his own trip to Arizona. This race just got a whole lot tighter.
Yeah, we're seeing that. These margins are getting so tight. They're forcing Trump and Republicans to spend money they didn't think they would have to spend. It's sort of the reverse of what was happening to Joe Biden just a couple of months ago. Stephanie Murray from the Arizona Republic, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, and for more on all of this, visit us at battlegroundnews.com or click on the QR code right here. You can sign up for our newsletter, download our interactive swing state map, and find our social media links. And if you miss an episode, that's all right. You can catch up on YouTube or through our podcast. Up next, why the economy and inflation are still major issues in all of our swing states. But first, here's what some of our swing state voters are saying about the issues of immigration and border security. Battleground will be right back.
Immigration is a concern to me.
A lot of them are people that are undesirable people, like terrorists.
I came to the United States legally.
A lot of my family came from Mexico, and a couple of them are illegal.
Now the Trump administration is calling this border thing a crisis now.
It's totally fine because there are jobs here that white people don't want to work.
We're a nation of immigrants, so I think that people should be allowed to migrate here.
I just have a problem with them not putting a wall up.
I wish our economy was better.
It sucks, you can't pay for gas without having to pay $60.
I don't think it's necessarily who the president is that determines the economy.
I think it has to do with the different wars that are occurring right now across the world.
I mean, if you go to the grocery store, you can see the prices going up.
I do know that egg prices went crazy.
I don't even eat chocolate anymore because I can't afford it.
It's getting harder and harder to just live day to day.
Welcome back to Battleground. Swing state voters there talking about the #1 issue in all 7 of our states, the economy. And new economic numbers out this week suggest the inflation rate is coming down. That's good news, but the bad news is that most of us still feel like we're paying too much for groceries, gas, and other essentials. And for first-time home buyers and car buyers, high interest rates, a major problem still. For more on how the economy continues to impact swing state voters, I'm pleased to be joined by Medora Lee, longtime business and personal finance reporter with USA Today. Medora, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so help us understand what can feel like conflicting news for most of us. The inflation rate is coming down, but that's not the same thing as inflation coming down when the price of the things we pay for still seems too high.
The inflation rate is coming down. I think in July, over the last 12 months, the inflation rate dropped to 2.9%, the lowest since, I think, March 2021. And that's great news. But when you go to the store and you still see eggs $3 a dozen and a loaf of bread maybe, $5 a loaf, you feel like there's no relief. That's because inflation only measures the rate of change of prices, and there's no actually going back to lower prices. Everybody's comparing what they paid at the store now to what they paid in 2019. You're never going to see those 2019 prices again, basically, because of the cumulative effect of inflation. All those prices have already risen. They're probably not going to come down.
Wow. Okay. So when politicians promise, a return to the good old times, that's probably not quite true.
No. And every economist will tell you that just because the rate of inflation drops, the prices don't drop. I mean, we would have to have something called deflation where everything drops all the time, but that's probably not going to happen because there have been some big price increases all across the board, including wages, which are pretty sticky. Very few people I know will take a pay cut.
Now, but what about those interest rates are so high and they've become prohibitive for people wanting to buy big ticket items? What if the Fed cuts interest rates? Could that change the way people feel about the economy?
The people who are not going to like it are the savers, because the banks will immediately start cutting all the interest rates on their savings accounts, money market accounts, et cetera.
Right.
But you will definitely see some relief in terms of mortgage rates, probably also. And when you go and open up a credit card, you might see a little difference, or a car loan. But I mean, if the Fed is only going to cut 25 basis points or a quarter percentage points in September, like most people expect they will, it'll help, but don't expect a big tidal wave of change because they've hiked rates so much, and that a quarter point may not feel like relief, especially now that a lot of people have credit card debt already that's built up. I mean, credit card debt's at a record high.
Yeah.
So
a good reality check from Medora Lee. We appreciate that, USA Today. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Up next, we head to all 7 of our swing states to see where this race stands in these final days of summer. Battleground will be right back. Welcome back to Battleground. A quick reminder, we're now here 5 days a week, laser focused on the voters in the 7 swing states that will decide this election with just 80 days left until November 5th. And next week, we'll have full coverage of the Democratic National Convention, including a live stream of the entire convention on our website, battlegroundnews.com. Finally tonight, a look at the race in all 7 of our swing states. Beginning with Arizona and Ronald Hansen with the Arizona Republic. Ronald.
The state of the presidential race in Arizona has really changed. The shift in the ticket has given Democrats a lot of extra momentum now that they didn't have before. The recent appearance in Glendale, Arizona for Kamala Harris has really reinvigorated Democrats. They showed up in record numbers.
Thanks, Ronald. To Georgia and Tia Mitchell from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Tia.
The polls are showing that Harris has again pulled up near Trump, dead heat with Trump in Georgia. The election predictor sites put Georgia, they had Georgia as leaning Republican. Now they have Georgia as a true toss-up.
Thanks, Tia. Up to Michigan and Grant Schwab from the Detroit News. Grant.
Thank you, SE. In Michigan, Democrats seem to have more mojo than they did a month ago. They seem energized, especially by Kamala Harris and Tim Walz making a visit to Metro Detroit last week. The duo drew an audience of about 15,000 people at an event, according to the campaign. And that seems to have bothered Donald Trump.
Thanks, Grant. To Nevada and John Ralston from the Nevada Independent.
The state of the presidential race in Nevada it's once again a race. Trump had been ahead by outside of the margin of error for many polls, but polls now show a dead heat. Democrats who had been worried before the debate, despondent after it, are now reinvigorated and believe their superior ground game can carry them to victory.
Thanks as always, John. Now to North Carolina and Sarah Gleason with the Wilmington Star News. Sarah.
Things are shaking up here in North Carolina. For months, Donald Trump was leading in the polls until recently. A Cook political report released this week showed Kamala Harris up 2 percentage points. And I've been hearing from Democratic Party chairs that there was a surge in energy after Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris stepped in.
Thanks, Sarah. Here in Pennsylvania and Constitution Hall, just across the street from where the Trump-Harris debate will be held on September 10th, we find Jeff Cole from Fox 29 Philadelphia. Jeff.
In the battleground of Pennsylvania, in these early unpredictable weeks, Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump 50 to 46% in a New York Times Siena College poll. But it's not all good news for Harris, as the poll finds voters trust Trump more on the economy and immigration.
Thanks, Jeff. And finally, to Wisconsin and Henry Redmond with the Wisconsin Examiner. Henry.
Statewide elections are often decided by less than 1%, so even with all of that Harris momentum, it's still looking like this is going to be a close race, and Trump has just as good of a chance as he did before Harris.
Thanks, Henry. And that's it for now. I'm Essie Cupp. See you next time on Battleground.